What's up, college football fans? Tony Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show, joined again by CJ Olson, and we're going to recap this SMU Tulane game in the American Athletic Championship. But before we get into all that, guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football or G5 football, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. CJ, well, I know your fanship team, the SMU Mustangs, they won their first American Athletic Conference Championship, but what are your thoughts on the game initially? And, you can sprinkle in a little bowl selection, woes in there if you want to as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for whichever 6-6 ACC team we're going to play in this upcoming bowl game because I'm pretty sure the Geneva Convention prohibits a lot of the things we're going to do to their offense, if I had to guess, based on how this entire season has gone. Anyways, so as far as the conference championship game goes, it was one of those games where the entire time was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I was waiting, I guess just these last few years of watching what SMU's defense was, I was just waiting for it to be that. But SMU's defense just kept making play after play like they have all season. I don't know why in my head I was doubting them or waiting for something to go wrong. Maybe I was just giving too much credit to the Tulane offense, but I don't know. I think they're a very good offense. I mean, they showed that, a stat that their running back is, I think, like fifth in the country in yards after contact. And tackling is an area, especially in open space, where SMU has been not bad, but like of the different, factors of the defense, you would say it was one of the weaker ones, but it was still good, just not excellent like a lot of the other things, like the pass rush, who I believe we had 7 sacks yesterday. So that was something I was a little nervous about, but we bottled their running backs up. I mean, their leading rusher, 11 carries, 44 yards, 26 carries total for 31 yards. That obviously incorporates sack yardage, but that was definitely the standout of the game was the defense. And KHJ had exactly the game we needed from him. There was that one interception. The second one, it was down by the end zone. He tried to wedge a ball. I see what he saw. He saw cover 2. The safety was playing hard inside, had his hips turned all the way around, and he tried to put a ball on a rope down the line to the corner of the goal line, and he just couldn't get the ball there. That's a really tough throw for any quarterback to make. Nonetheless, a guy making his first career start. But all in all, outside of that, for the most part, KHJ was exactly what we needed him to be, probably even better than what we needed him to be and what we were expecting him to be. So, I mean, all in all, they can't erase the hardware. No matter what kind of wizardry the committee did to rationalize Liberty above SMU, you can't take away an AAC championship. And that was the goal coming into the year.
So since the game has been played, it's been announced that Willie Fritz is going to be the next coach of Houston, and that was pretty much everyone knew that prior to the game. It seemed like, how much at all, if at all, do you feel like just the interview process, all the stuff that goes into making that call happen, him taking the next head coaching job, played a factor in Tulane losing this game? And the second question, what does this speak to SMU's depth as it pertains to losing, your guys, starting, franchise QB, if you will, and Preston Stone, and kind of just being able to keep the ship going and winning the championship?
Yeah, so I'll start with the depth question. So not only did we lose Preston Stone, we also lost Charles Woods in the second quarter. He's a first-team conference cornerback, great, incredible player. I don't know the extent of his injury, but he ended up hobbling off the field and did not come back in, I don't believe. And then we also lost the guy, Jordan Curley. He was the wide receiver 1 coming into the year. He ended up he ended up tearing his ACL a couple weeks ago. I forget who we played Memphis. It was either the Memphis game or the week before the Memphis game. He tore his ACL and was out. And it's just been next man up all season. And so I think, that definitely that's a testament to the defense. Something I noticed was, I believe it was KD Hall. He was a transfer from Tulane 2 years ago, played a lot last year, was a really good cornerback for us this year. I saw him on the sidelines this game on the TV, and I was like, oh my God, that's KD Hall, the Tulane transfer. Like, I completely forgot about him. And it's not a knock against him for not finding as much playing time as he did last year. I think that goes to that depth piece of, like, we just have so much talent that we just keep reloading and restacking. And a lot of the talk amongst fans has been a lot about like going forward, what does the recruiting look like? What does the transfer portal look like? And I've said, like, at least one wide receiver, maybe 2 or 3. And people are like, oh, no, we don't need that. We just need to go out and get starting offensive linemen, starting defensive linemen. Now, Snowy, I think you know enough about the transfer portal. You're doing enough of these shows. You know that starting offensive linemen aren't just like hanging out in the portal for you to go grab. Like that's the hardest position to get. Speaking of depth, I believe our left tackle came out of the game as well, and we had to bring in our backup there. It was either left tackle or right tackle, but one of the tackles was out as well. So going back to depth, we had another 4-star transfer come in and fill his spot. So like those spots just aren't growing on trees. And so that's where I think that adding anywhere is always good. Like adding more talent is not bad. And I think you're discrediting, not you specifically, but I think generally fans discredit the competitiveness of these players to want to avoid competition. I know that as more and more people enter the transfer portal, that's what it looks like. I can assure you that's not the case. Like people have not gotten anti-competitive, which I have an antitrust law final in a couple of weeks, and the phrase anti-competitive like sends chills down my spine. But it's not an anti-competitive thing. It's something completely different. And so, yeah, depth is always huge. And that's, I think, what separated SMU from a lot of teams in the AAC this year, hopefully in the ACC going forward. But as for the Tulane thing, part of me wants to say, well, the news got announced that Houston was finalizing the Fritz contract yesterday, like a half hour before the game. Like the players are already on the field. They're not going to see that. Maybe somebody yells it at them as they're coming out on the tunnel, but you're not thinking about that in that moment. And so I want to say like, oh, it's not a thing, like whatever. But I was also like around in 2021. I was very aware of what was happening with SMU and with Sonny Dykes potentially going to TCU. And it was palpable. You could feel like there was the air was thicker. You could just kind of sense something was wrong. And a lot of I remember there was a conversation that some of the players said that they had where it was like, do we want basically, do we address this or do we not? And whatever we decide, we just need to go about our business after that. Like we just need to make a decision, stick with it, and just own that decision. And they decided we're not going to address it. We're not going to expect coach to address it. We're just going to go about our business and win games. And they ended up finishing the season like 8-4, I think, after starting 7-0 or 7-1. And so it's hard to say like, oh no, it didn't factor in. There's definitely some intangible factor. I don't know if it was the difference between Tulane not having a legitimate touchdown drive. I mean, obviously they had the 1-yard touchdown drive and then the touchdown drive that shouldn't have happened because of a false start penalty, which, ended up with half of the defenders, if not more, stopping playing at 100% because they're like, this is obviously a penalty. So I don't know necessarily if it affected it to that degree, but yeah, I would assume that there's some level of impact. I don't know. I don't believe Fritz calls plays on either side. But the head coach, even when they don't call plays, has a huge impact on the game plan and stuff like that. So I would assume it had a big impact, but I don't know necessarily if it was the separating factor in the game.
So, as far as NIL goes, SMU, as far as the AAC goes, they're leaps and bounds really ahead of the second place person, whoever that is, whichever program is second in NIL. But it's a clear cut. Obviously the SMU's NIL efforts trump really anyone in the AAC. Do you feel like there's any, I don't know what the right word is, not remorse or maybe just, I know there's the excitement of going to the ACC from the AAC, talk about a tongue twister, is there, and rightfully so. But it seems like SMU, had they stayed back, 2 or 3 years before going to the AAC or the ACC, they could have ran the table and, won conference championship back to back, possibly. You think there's any kind of a wish amongst the fans of, okay, we're glad we're going, but we wish we could have won this thing a few more times?
I mean, yeah, I would assume. I mean, if your question is, do SMU fans wish they would have won in 2019 when they had Buechele and Prochet and Xavier Jones and Turner Cox and Delano Robinson and like guy after guy, that was something that I really enjoyed last night, was guys from teams that just graduated a couple years ago, naming dudes, just being like, because a lot of writers were like, I'm thinking back on like Shehan Jayaraja, he talked about it a lot. And I love the work he does. He's one of the best in the game, in my opinion. And not just because he talks positively about SMU and SMU does good things, but just in general. And that was something he talked about, was like, there have been so many guys to come through SMU. And so like, obviously, yeah, would I have liked it for them and for the fans that they won conference championships, absolutely. But at the same time, like, everything happens for a reason, and you have to win the games on the field. And this is the first time that top down, it seems like the buy-in has been not we're going to come out hot. It's been we're going to win a conference championship. I think this was the first time that I really felt like the entire goal was win the conference championship, and then the rest will sort itself out, whatever that rest looks like. Because I remember not to specifically invoke Sonny's name, but I remember a lot of those Sonny Dykes teams. It was like, we're going to come out hot. We're going to get ranked. But it was, and we're going to see how long we can sustain that. But it never seemed like the point was like, we want to win the AAC. It was a lot like, we want to be the best team we can be. And like, sometimes that might be winning the AAC. And it just never ended up being that. Maybe that's just revisionist history on my part. But yeah, I guess if the question is, would you rather won more games than you did in the past? Then yeah, sure.
Last question before we jump off here. So Kevin Jennings, comes in for Stone, doesn't light the world on fire, but plays well. Do you think he will be back at SMU next year, or do you think he's going to, given his, what he's put on paper, his film, he may want to test the portal for a starting job as soon as next year? What are your thoughts as far as Jennings specifically goes?
Sonoe, I don't know if you've noticed this. We don't have a lot of guys test the portal.
I've noticed.
That was something I tweeted a couple days ago. I think it was a UTSA fan, but I'm not positive. Maybe it was a UNT fan. They're both going to hate that I am getting them mixed up potentially. But it was something they were talking about, how there are so many guys and it's such a deep roster. And I basically said, you don't have to worry about depth leaving when your NIL is in order, basically. And so, yeah, maybe KHJ tests the portal, maybe not. I mean, they have a bunch of guys behind him as well. I mean, they're bringing in Tyler Aronson, who is a borderline 4-star quarterback coming into the next class. And then the class after that, they have the Duncanville quarterback, Keelan Robinson, who is very much so a 4-star. I think he might on 1 or 2 services borderline be a 5. There are guys. I've dubbed Preston Stone the future, years ago when he committed. And then KHJ was the future of the future. And now we have the future of the future of the future. And honestly, Keldrick Luster, also a very talented recruit in his own right. And Tyler Aronson. So there are so many quarterbacks that if KHJ were to test things, I'm not going to lose sleep over. But at the same time, KHJ is very impressive. I mean, we talked about previewing the UNT game, the anecdote that I love where when he was a junior in high school and had no offers at all, and professional wide receiver coaches were like, oh, so where are you going to play? Because it was just a foregone conclusion. A guy with that arm is obviously playing Power 5, maybe high level group of 5, and he had no offers. And so yeah, I assume he'll be taken care of. My understanding is, and I obviously don't want to speak for anybody, my understanding is that he's happy here. And he, he's one of those people that's not afraid of the competition, knowing that there are guys coming behind him when there's already a guy in front of him. So, I mean, it's still Stone's team, but I don't think anybody's rushing to leave.
Awesome. All right, CJ. Well, we appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.